So maybe we'll even lampshade this and just let everyone know that we've been dealing with audio issues this entire time. And so even though this episode is like 5 minutes long, it's taken us an hour and a half to get to this point. And so it's very clear that we are out of practice.
Yeah, I guess it's a good thing we didn't go live too.
Yeah, too.
That would have been hell.
Yeah. Hello, and welcome to the Absolute Guard Podcast. We're a competitive fighting game community podcast examining history and current events from the lens of the Arizona grassroots scene.
Yes, welcome. This is episode 90. My name is Benny, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Jon. It's been a little bit over 2 months since our last episode. Episode 89 was back on August 14th. We've both been just a little busy with life things. We were taking it kind of week to week and reaching out to each other and checking like, hey, are you able to do a show this week? And just due to circumstances for both of us, like it just wasn't something that was able to be done like for basically the last 2 months. So, and in some ways it's been a little frustrating, but at the same time, it's like, it's been helpful for both of us because we've had a lot of stuff to deal with personally.
Agree. Yeah, every time we'd like have the opportunity to get back on the wagon, like if it wasn't something I was dealing with, it was something you were dealing with, and we've got a lot of things going on. Maybe it has to do with like getting closer to the end of the year or something. I don't know, but one of the reasons why I really wanted to make sure we did a show today in particular is because I'm about to embark on a new chapter in my life as far as being a homeowner, and that's part of the explanation for where I've been. But in general, we're going to be talking about that today, like where we've been, and then also like where we want to go in the future.
Yeah, exactly. So, like I said, it's been about 2 months. Our last show was on August 14th. Since then, my wedding anniversary is on August 16th. So, me and my wife celebrated our 21st wedding anniversary since then. And then, in terms of other things, like I've been still doing flight lessons. It's kind of been here and there. Like my work schedule's been kind of tough. I mentioned that on previous episodes in terms of, I work at night, and then we do podcasts on Tuesday, and then that's one of my off days. And the part of my training where I'm at right now, basically I've kind of had to do some things in the evenings. So it's been like, hey Jon, I got a lesson scheduled this day because I got to work around, my instructor's schedule and his availability. And I'm already limiting myself to 2 times a week that I can even do anything. So that was a little frustrating on my part, just because like anytime that I had to, basically reach out and say, hey, I have this going on. I felt a little bit bad about that. But then, the next week or something, or maybe the same week, Jon would be like, hey, I got something else going on too. And it's like, all right, well, let's push things back a week. And that week turned into 2 months. But since then, in terms of flying, I think the last episode or one of the episodes before, I was talking about doing like my first solo flight. That was pretty cool. But again, that was just me kind of hanging around the airport, doing what they call touch and goes, like multiple landings, and just hanging around the airport. So since then, I've done my third and fourth solo, where basically we go out around what they call the Northeast practice area over Fountain Hills and near Bartlett Lake, and it's my opportunity to basically fly out away from the airport. It's not very far. It's probably like 30 minutes, about an hour away. But still, for a student pilot, or for anybody for that matter, you're venturing off on your own. It's like taking your first road trip and you're by yourself or something like that, right? Except
Right.
I'm in a plane. I'm not in a car, and I get to go out there. I gotta announce in the practice area. Basically, what you do is you announce yourself publicly to everybody else on the radio. Hey, I'm at this location. I'm about to do this. It gives people a heads up on the radio of like if you're practicing some kind of maneuvers or whatever. And then basically, I get myself back, navigate myself back to the airport. Contact the tower, do everything I need to, land, and then go home. So those third and fourth solos, as they were deemed, were pretty fun, very liberating, just to kind of go out there and actually like I don't have a GoPro or anything set up in there, but like there's a lot of talking to myself, like, when I'm taking off and I'm out there by myself and I'm just like, I'm doing this shit. Like I'm out here by myself, like there's nobody else here with me, like, and I've got to find my way back and I've got to do everything that I'm supposed to to get myself back safely. So that's been a really kind of like surreal and liberating experience to do that. So well, yeah. Other than the third and fourth solos that I did, which were like I said, pretty liberating and very fun. A lot of talking
Yeah.
to myself as I was kind of just out there by myself. Uh, really away from the airport and not just around the airport. That was a very fun time. And then just to kind of put all the kind of flight stuff together because like there was other weeks in there. The other thing I did is went with my instructor. We did what they call a cross country to Ryan Airport, which is just outside of Tucson, and that was a very interesting flight because during my that was I actually got airsick on that flight,
Oh,
and
you're
that
sick.
that yeah that never happened to me in all the other lessons that I did. I mean, there was one time I think early on when I wasn't feeling too great, and then we kind of just went cut the lesson early and went back. But since then, like I had nothing happen, and for this flight down the Ryan, um, it's a pretty big thing in terms of like a milestone in what I have to do in terms of like setting waypoints and stuff like that for us to get down there. A lot of that stuff's done through technology nowadays, but they teach you how to do it manually, and they want you to do it that way. But anyway, like
Okay.
we got down to Ryan, I was feeling okay, other than a little bit of rough flying, kind of getting out of Chandler. But we get down to Ryan, we land, and then we take off, and I'm kind of like, all right, what's our heading? So he gives me the heading. I set us there, and then like it was a hot day too. Like it was like this summer's been kind of brutal for us in Arizona, and the
Yes.
week
Kind of
before
is
the
an
week before
understatement,
that
yeah.
lesson, yeah, the week before that lesson, like we had this week where it was like 80 degrees like all week, and it was like great, and I was like, oh, we're finally done with this, right? And then like
Yeah.
this week, the week that I was doing that cross country to Ryan with him, all the heat kicked back up,
Yep.
and
I know
so
exactly
the
what week
the
you're
sun
talking
was
about.
out,
Yep.
and these trainer planes that we're in, like they don't have AC or anything like that. They have a real tiny window that
Oh, they
you
don't have
really can't.
AC?
No, there's no AC in there at all.
Oh man. I guess that makes
Yeah,
sense, but wow. Okay. Yeah.
yeah. So like we get to ride, we take off, like I said, and then um, after I kind of set our heading, or I have us pointed the right way. I kind of like just kind of look at the sunset, and I'm looking over there, and I'm just like, I think this heat's getting to me. Like I don't feel too well. And the crazy
Got
thing
it.
is like during my pre-flight, like I had to check all this stuff with the plane. I looked in the back seat and I saw this like blue bag, and like I'd never seen one in one of the other planes. Like I don't know if just it just never was in sight or whatever. And I look at it and I'm just like, oh, it's a puke bag, it's a vomit bag. And I'm like,
Oh.
oh well, it's over there if I need it, right? And sure enough, I'm just like when I said, "Hey, I don't feel like I think this heat's getting to me. I don't feel good." I was like, "There's a bag back there," and my instructor was just like, "One of your bags?" Like I guess he was kind of confused, and I guess he ended up reaching into one of he has some in his own bag, being an instructor, being in planes all the time. So he grabs it and he gives it to me. And then the minute he gives it to me, I throw up a little bit in the plane right there, and I'm just like, "Oh my god, I feel like shit." I was like, "This is horrible." So he takes over and like, he's trying to just kind of make sure everything's okay. I'm not really like communicating with him at that point because I don't feel great. And
Yeah.
I hear him say something like, "Do you want to land at Marana," which is one of the other like an untowered airport nearby. And I was like, "No, no, I'm good." And for the rest of that flight, like luckily I was with him and he just flew the rest of the way, you know, um, and it was pretty chill. And he's just like, "Yeah, don't worry about it. Like it happens."
Yeah,
So
that's why he's there, right?
yeah,
But
exactly. And I was just like, yeah, better to happen during the time when I'm with him. And um, there's this big thing where like it's almost like when you go when you're in a car, right? Or you're like you're the passenger in a car. Like I know a lot of people, they get motion sick. They can't
oh me.
read things. They can't look at their
Yeah.
phones, right? You
I
got to
can't play
keep your head
certain
out the
video games,
window.
dude. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like, and that's the same thing with the plane. Like, your eyes should be outside. One, because that's literally how you're looking around and seeing obstacles or whatever. And the other thing is just to kind of keep yourself coordinated and your equilibrium and everything like that. And
Yeah.
the thing he pointed out was like, I think what happened to you was like, there was a lot of you looking inside and looking at instruments inside the plane and worrying about stuff like that when your eyes should have been outside more. And that probably, that plus the heat and everything kind of contributed to all that.
Yeah,
And,
totally.
good lesson to learn at that point. So I was like, yeah, it was definitely an experience, and like just the irony of it all, of like seeing that puke bag in the back when I was doing my pre-flight, and then just like having to use it that same flight. I was just like, oh my god.
have have you ever had motion sickness before, like in general, or any other kind of
um,
vehicle,
not not really.
or
Maybe
like a
an
roller
oat. Like
coaster or anything?
yeah, yeah, roller coaster a couple times. Like I've ridden roller coasters here and there and not have a problem. There was this one time we went to Knott's Berry Farm, and like this was I think this was our second time going there, and like there's a wood roller coaster that they have like right next to the entrance, and we got there early, and I remember looking at the entrance or the that roller coaster and not seeing a line. So I told everybody, I was like, hey, anybody want to go with this with me? And they're like, no. And I was like, all right, whatever, I'm gonna go on this right now to start, start the day, because there's no line, right? So I go in there, everything's fine until like the very end, and I get off and I'm just like, I feel like garbage. And the rest of the day, like I didn't do any other rides or anything like that, and I was just like, everybody's like, "Hey, you want to go do this?" No, I'm okay. Like, I got my thrill for the day. Like,
Yep,
and
that's
like
the
that was a
worst, dude.
mistake.
Like, yeah, you pay for the whole day at the theme park, and then you ride one ride or a couple rides, and then you get sick, and you're like, I don't want to do this.
Yeah,
I'm
like
sorry, I want to go
I was
shopping
like,
or something instead. Let me go see a show.
yeah, I was like, that was a mistake. But I was like,
Yeah,
yeah, that's
that
probably the
happened to
one other
me.
time that was like major. Yeah.
Yeah, like I've gotten car sick all my life, and one thing I noticed is that whenever I have like an empty stomach in particular, that's when it gets really bad.
Oh,
So
yeah, I think that was actually what contributed as well. Not the empty stomach thing, but there was like I wasn't keeping good track of time, because usually I try to take a nap, try to drink and eat something light, and then like
mhm,
I'd asked my daughter to get some food, and it was like then I looked at the time when she brought me the food, and I think it was like an hour and a half before we had to fly, so I ended up just like
wolfing it
downing the
down.
sandwich, and I was just like, that was a mistake. I was like, I was when I was thinking back on everything, I was just like, yeah, I never do that before I go on flights, and I was like, that's probably why.
Yeah.
So definitely, yeah, lessons to be learned. Besides that, like, I think a couple weeks ago we were supposed to actually fly down to Marana for a night flight. Um,
Okay.
and then I got to school and like I wasn't feeling well. So I was just like, after what had happened on the previous lesson, I was just like, hey, I just got here. I'm not feeling great. And then I was thinking about it, and I was like, what else do I have to do, like in terms of lessons? Like I didn't want to cancel outright, and I wanted to be productive. And I was like, hey, can we just practice or do these night landings I got to do? Because I guess I had to do like a total of 10. So there's going to be two that I do when we do that flight to Murano, whenever that's going to be. So, and I had one already just from happenstance from like, being out at night one time. So we
Mm.
just ended up doing 7 that night. And unfortunately, the only unfortunate part was that it was hot that day. It's like it still hasn't cooled down just yet. It's kind of getting there this week. So hopefully that's how it's going to be moving forward. But yeah, it's like every
Yeah.
time we landed, he was like opening the door. He was just like, yeah.
I think you briefly mentioned like what your instructor had to say about you getting sick, but like did he have any advice on how to prevent being sick as a pilot? Like obviously it sounds like it was a lot about like where you were looking, but like did he give you
Yeah.
any tips on how to avoid doing what you were doing and looking at too many things, or because you got to look at those
Not
instruments, right?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, but it should be more like I think I agree with him too, because like thinking back on it, like I was kind of like focusing on things a little too much. Like I was too worried about like what this was set to or what this was doing, and like I was kind of just like all over the place. And like yeah, typically like yeah, you just kind of want to have your eyes scanning outside, and then like occasionally you look down and be like, all right, what's my altitude, what's my speed, what's this, those kind of things. So it's like just improving on those kind of skills, and literally just keeping your eyes outside. And that makes a ton of sense, like especially like I get pretty car sick if I'm not driving. It's actually subsided a lot as I've gotten older. When I was younger, it used to be
Oh,
pretty bad, and like I hated
okay.
it, and I was just like, I always had to be looking outside. Like if I looked at anything when I was a kid, I was just like, I didn't feel good
Yep.
at all.
I get
Yeah.
so jealous because like people might like our age now, like they're like if I'm driving them around, like they're looking at their cell phones and just killing time that way, and I'm like, but I'm sitting in the passenger seat, I can't do that. I just gotta sit there
Yeah.
and like look out the road, you know.
Yeah.
Gotta keep the horizon line in eyesight at all times. Oh man, dude, like when I went to Hawaii for a vacation a couple of years ago, and like we went on a submarine tour, and that was
Ooh.
really really bad for me.
Oh yeah.
Because like
Yeah.
in order to get to the submarine, you have to take a boat out there because the submarine's obviously it's in the middle of the
Yeah.
ocean and it needs to. So we get out there, but we take this boat and the boat's like really rocky. So I get sick on the boat. I don't even get sick on the submarine. And so then we get on the submarine and like we have to actually exit the boat, climb onto the submarine, and go down the hatch. So like that whole time I'm like I'm gonna throw up because you're also like
Yeah.
shaking trying to stay on the boat
Mhm.
on the submarine. So obviously it was a tourist company, so nothing was really dangerous unless you're trying to go look at the Titanic with the Mad Catz controller. That's a deep cut. But I think what ended up happening though is then we got into the submarine and it didn't dive for a little bit because we were waiting for everybody. So the submarine was rocking around too, but it was worse because I was underwater, so I couldn't see the horizon.
Yeah.
So it was so, but like I had the barf bag and everything in front of me, and then eventually we dove really deep, and it wasn't like we weren't rocking around anymore. And
Yeah.
it was only when we got back up after the tour was over, we got we surfaced and then we got back on that fucking boat, and I was like, oh, this is horrible. Luckily, and a lot of that was because we hadn't eaten lunch that day, so we immediately went and found a bunch of food. I felt better afterwards, but that was probably
Yeah.
my most recent brush with motion sickness. Well, the actual most recent brush was because of it was oddly enough because of Chase, one of our previous guests of the podcast, because it was a tournament in Tucson and he was playing in grand finals. So I was rooting for my boy, but Jess and I needed to drive to Mesa for a family dinner, and so I'm like, Jess, you
Mm.
drive. I need to watch my friend and make sure that make sure I see him win. You know, all that stuff, be encouraging.
Yeah.
And then my wife has a stick shift car, so it's constantly start as she shifts gears. You know, and I'm just like, it was so bad, dude. And we were on our way to dinner, so I had an empty stomach. I had all the fucking like the perfect recipe for motion sickness. It just all driven
Yeah.
by passion for my friend's ability to place high in a tournament.
Yeah. Hey, it was for a good cause, right?
Yeah, yeah. But
Yeah.
that's cool though. Like you had mentioned to me a couple times like that you weren't feeling well, and I didn't really understand that or like how that played in with the flight stuff. But it makes sense that it's air sickness is how you described it.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's how I describe it.
Okay.
Yeah, because
Yeah,
like I said, I
that
mean, other than that, one time, like early on when I was taking lessons, like I hadn't really had any situations like that, and like I figured it was a kind of like getting your bearings kind of thing, getting used to how things maneuver and things like that. Yeah, but I don't know. Other than that, let's see. It's been yeah, that's kind of been like the kind of flight things now. So kind of we're kind of at the point to where we're kind of winding things down. Again, like I said, just kind of checking boxes. We've got this night flight. That's supposed to be my next lesson is the night flight to Marana, and that was actually supposed to be yesterday, and then that got canceled just due to maintenance. So again, it's just I know with when it came to starting flight training, a lot of people were saying like, you should go 2 to 3 times a week, and it's just like it's just not something that's feasible for me. And even at this point in my training, it's like it's not something that is necessary. Like early on, like you definitely want to do that just because like that's the time when you're trying to like retain information and do stuff like that. But my instructor doesn't have any problems with when I get in the plane, like I'm doing like my radio stuff perfectly good, and there's other things like he doesn't have anything that major concerns where it's just like holy shit, you don't know how to do this anymore, right? Like it's kind of
cool.
been
No,
like
that's awesome,
been
man.
like riding a bicycle, so that's been a good confidence booster for me in terms of that too.
Yeah, I think we were talking with Mike about the episode says back about that. Like, as far as like when it becomes like routine or old hat, and then it's becomes that's when it like becomes like hardened as like a second nature kind of deal, or it feels more natural. You can do it without like subconsciously without thinking about it too
Yeah.
much. Muscle memory,
Yeah.
etc.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, we talked about that in fighting games too, in terms of like taking breaks and stuff. Because I know some people they just think that they have to, like grind and grind and grind, and I'm just like, I've never been that kind of person. And like, I think even when it comes to doing these flight training stuff, like I think those breaks that are whether they're happening because of scheduling conflicts or maintenance or whatever, just not feeling well. Like I think those have helped kind of like solidify like things in my mind, like what am I supposed to do, you know? So that's been really
I think
good.
I think it just our competitive lens as a fighting game community. Like we often are like, this is why I didn't practice fighting games, but very rarely do. I don't know. It's nice to be able to talk about why we didn't practice fighting games, like what we replaced it with, because it's not like we just didn't do anything while we weren't playing, you know. And
Yeah,
I tend to forget that because you get in that competitor mindset and you're like, oh, these guys haven't been grinding like I have. I'm gonna fuck them up, you know. And it's
yeah.
yeah, that's true because you know they had Benny's been literally in the air, or in the air and puking his guts out only once.
Yeah. Yeah,
Man,
I'm
but I
hoping
can
it
relate to
doesn't happen
that.
again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did I tell you
Yeah.
I've only ever gotten to fly first class once, and that was on our way back from our honeymoon this year. And the
Uh-huh.
one time I flew first class. Oh, sorry. On the way there, someone got sick and threw up, and that
Oh.
was kind of rough. And to her credit, like she tried to make it to the bathroom. It was like after the landing, so like that
Yeah.
it makes sense. She tried. Um, and then on the way back, when we were flying first, that was the time we flew first class. Sorry, we flew coach on the way and then first class on the way back.
Mm.
And it was someone brought a baby in first class, and the baby was crying the whole time. And I'm just like, I
Yeah.
paid first class for this, for the experience I could have gotten in coach. I'm like I sound like a Karen, but I'm like, no, like this is like the only time I've ever flown first class. Like it's my honeymoon.
Yeah.
Like, this is the time. And I was like, okay, this is gonna be great. Fucking baby. Whole time. And she kept like
Oh
asking the
man.
flight attendant to like grab like things from the top, like from the baby bag and stuff like that. I'm just bitching. That actually is a good way to describe the way I've spent my last couple months, is I've just been bitching about everything. That's actually the reality of it here, and I think you and I were talking about that. Like, um, I just fundamentally haven't had a ton of things to say on this show. Like,
Mhm.
without a doubt, I've been busy. Like we're in the middle of buying a house right now. We actually started looking in I would say March or April of this year, and we just had the luxury of time. Just given our current living arrangement and whatnot, like we were able to like take our time, really find out like what Jess and I were looking for out of a house, and we ended up finding a really nice one. But if there's one thing I learned about this entire process is that nothing's ever a done deal. And
Yeah.
uh, and I'm not going to air all that shit on the internet, obviously, but like we are now in a position where I think things are finally settled down. Like I literally signed a bunch of papers today. We get the keys on Friday, so I'm pretty confident in saying that I'm going to be a homeowner right now. And again, that's part of the reason why I wanted to even really push for our off day recording episode here after 2 months, is that um, like we've talked about my wedding, we've talked about your flight lessons, we've talked about all these different milestones in our lives that are completely independent of the fighting game stuff. And I also know that our audience is our friends, and uh, I know that I have not been around, and a lot of it just has to do with just being so stressed about this whole process. Dealt with a lot of shit at work, that it'd be a terrible idea to talk about that on the internet too. But I am now in a spot where I think things are gonna start to slow down. As soon as we got to move, we got to do all that other stuff. We got to pack, we got to move, we got to do all the side projects in the house, like to get it ready. But by and large, the house is it's pretty ready to move in anyway. So hopefully, I'm hoping that like by the end of November, I will be back in business as far as pursuing my hobbies again. Because that's the other side of it,
Yeah.
is like if I don't have a lot to say, then I could usually talk about what I'm doing with the fighting game stuff. But I can't even really talk about that because I haven't. It like coincides really well with like after Evo. This is something that's kind of. I think this would be really good for the next generation to understand about Evo. Is that the fighting game community that I grew up with, and the fighting game community before you and I were around, even
Yeah.
there was always an off season. Always, like Evo
Yeah.
would be the one, and then just fuck around for 3 or 4 months afterwards. We even do like the high school thing or like the college thing. We just cram a month or two before Evo, and then after that they wouldn't play for a very long time.
Yeah.
The scene always went dormant after Evo, and the irony around that is that's the worst time to go dormant because everybody and their mom
Yeah.
watches Evo, and then
Yeah, that's when
they
the hype is. Yeah, everybody's like, "Oh, I just saw this. I want to get into this. I want to play
yeah.
this game." Yeah,
Yep. So every year you have all these top players that we went super hard for Evo. I'm not even saying that I'm a top player, but I went really hard for Evo, and I know a lot of other people really did too. And then we got
yeah.
back, and fuck, that was like I'm so burnt out. I'm like burnt out, like not even like in the Street Fighter 6 way where you like I don't know when I'm gonna recover from the burnout. I
Yeah,
got burnt out at work. I got burnt out in fighting games, just in general. And then the house stuff has just created all this additional swirl and additional issues. So uh, I have not been super engaged with the community or with just my friends in general. Like I said, we haven't talked in months,
yeah,
and I'm hoping I want to get back to it, but it's been tough. There's also just this
yeah,
overlapping or like this looming specter of the election that's coming up too, and
yeah,
I won't go too deep into politics, but like what I have seen as far as how we treat each other in social media and how we like approach conversations with one another, like we got a big problem as a society. So like
yeah,
that's another reason why I have very little to say. Like if you go on Twitter, like it's just people shitting on each other so much and for
yeah,
every little thing, and I just can't. What do we do to contribute to that anymore? Like I looked at the most recent fighting game discourse, which was ECT Street Fighter Six is not well balanced. It's too random. It's too volatile, right? Because there's too many
yeah,
characters that are winning. There are too many upsets. And a year ago, we were complaining about Ken JP and Luke, and so
yeah,
it's like okay, so if a bunch of different characters win, then it's too volatile. But if only a specific set of characters win, then it's too stale. And like there's no middle ground ever. And no
yeah,
matter what, the game sucks, right? And you can take that with any other topic, you know, other video games, sports, politics, all that other stuff. So like, I'm not even just shitting on X. I'm saying like fucking every social media place, every social media platform
yeah.
I've been on. Just everyone's awful to each other. So like, I'm in the spot where like I've been isolating, I've been focusing on my own shit, and then all I've got is the social media stuff. And so that's also I think made me kind of bitter. um,
Yeah, I think for me, like when it came to like social media, I think the biggest thing that's been helpful for me is kind of like separating everything to kind of its own thing. So like Instagram kind of became like kind of a more public way for me to like show people like what I'm doing, whether it's like flight stuff. Like I don't necessarily share a bunch of like family stuff on there. Like occasionally things here and there. But it
yeah,
became like video games and became like, my flight lessons and things like that. Facebook became strictly kind of like friends and family, kind of keeping in touch. Like what I'm looking for on there is like what are my friends and family up to? Like, kids' birthdays, like, you guys going on vacation, who's getting married, whatever, stuff like that. That's the stuff I want to see. Like, I don't want to see people necessarily sharing about political things or this and that, memes or whatever. Like, I'll laugh at a meme on whatever platforms out there. But, I have friends that just literally like that's all I see in their feed is them just sharing memes and humorous stuff, and that's great. And then like Twitter, X or whatever you want to call it, I still call it Twitter, is like that's just kind of been like a cesspool of like sports stuff mixed with like all kinds of like you said, people just belittling each other and going at each other's throats and mixed with misinformation from both sides and all kinds of stuff. And I'm just like, you know, I don't know. I kind of just keep it around because like that's just I don't know, the redheaded stepchild of social media to me. Like, it's just like it's there. Like I find some entertainment in it, but it's just like it's more almost like a news aggregate for me, and find trending stuff on there more than anything. And I don't know. That's probably been the biggest help for me when it came to like social media, because at least that way I'm not like seeing a bunch of like political posts all over Facebook too. Because then, yeah, I think it would be even more of a mess for me to
what's
kind of look.
sad about it is like I don't even think discussing politics on social media should be a bad thing. Like
Yeah,
it's just
exactly.
that we make it a bad thing.
Yeah,
And
it's the people having those conversations, and yeah.
yeah, because I do think that like a lot of those issues are super important. All the stuff that's up in the election, and who we all would be voting for, and what the future of the country is going to look like. I just what's shocking to me is that I can have a completely different worldview and narrative than somebody else that I care about. I'm not talking about my wife. I'm just talking about like I have friends that's just completely opposite ends of the political spectrum for me, to me. And I pride myself on being able to bridge those gaps and talk with people, and I've fucked that up
Yeah.
many times. During the course of the pandemic, like I butted heads with so many people on different beliefs, and I thought
Yeah.
I was getting better at like bridging those gaps and understanding that more. But then again, with the way this election's been going, it's just like I got to see so much more ugliness in people that I didn't expect. And just like in the past, like since the pandemic, I got to see a lot of ugliness in people. And
Yeah.
if anything, this podcast is supposed to be like a shot in the arm or medicine for that. Shot in the arm is a bad way to put that. But you get what I mean, though. It's like it's there to it was there for me to like reconnect with friends, and then we can like actually have like real meaningful conversations and not be limited by fucking tweets and whether the character limits or somebody taking you out of
Yeah.
context or anything. And even then, the worst case scenario is that someone is willing to take you out of context. The audience for our show is friends, and so we fundamentally just want to talk to our friends, and we want to like I don't want to be fucking famous. I don't want to. I tried that. I tried doing all the YouTube stuff and the influencer stuff, and I saw how ugly the fucking national fighting game scene is, and how ugly everybody can be to each other. And maybe that's just me being insular, and I'll get the
Yeah.
stones to put myself back out there again. But man, I'm I'm, I would much rather work on my house right now.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I mean, it's almost the same thing. Like when it came to like me streaming and stuff. Like I was streaming random things, whether it was Tetris or Street Fighter or whatever. And then like that's the one thing that I always told people when people would be like, "Oh, you should be a pro gamer," because like my other friends like they know that I game, but I was like I've never considered myself like super hardcore into that sense. Like, and it's because of like other people I've met and friends like a Saber, Scott, like here I was thinking like I was a hardcore gamer, and then like I meet people like him, or I meet people like the the Spurlocks and stuff that are playing all kinds of other things that I've never even heard about, and I was just like, dude, I'm not even scratching the surface of like what it is to play video games. Like I'm in my kind of like my own world. I have my things that I love to play and I like and whatever, and that's like nothing compared to some of the stuff that I see them play, and I'm like, I didn't even know that this thing existed. Like this is the kind of stuff like I'd look at in magazines ads and stuff, and like they have the history of playing those things when they were growing up, and I was just like, that's stuff that I like dreamed about or I thought about, but like it was never a part of my reality. So like to me, it's
Yeah,
like it's one of those things like you think that you're into something, and then you just meet somebody else that's just so much more into it than you are, and you're just like, oh man, like I'm not even in that same tier of like kind of a hardcoreness really, I guess.
yeah. I mean,
There's nothing
that's
wrong with
kind
that
of
either. I'm just saying, yeah,
well, yeah, I was going to say that's part of the itch of the competitive side, right? Is that you
yeah,
see somebody like that. That's the point. Is you see somebody so much better than you, and you're like, I want to beat that fucking right. You want to be better than that. You want to be like that or better, and then that's how you just like that's competition, right? But you don't get
yeah,
that like for me, it's like my wife plays Helldivers, right? And a lot of
mhm,
our friends play Helldivers that I know of. They like that game was really popular for a little bit. I didn't care for it,
yeah,
but I didn't. What I'm trying to say is that like when people are passionate about it, like they will. What was my point? I can't remember. I just didn't give a shit about Helldivers. Oh, right. I didn't feel compelled to like get better at it and beat anybody about it because
yeah,
it's a co-op game, and obviously there's social aspect to it too. But like I didn't feel that same like tingling of mastery. I got that from the latest Dragon Ball game recently. I bought Sparking Zero. That game is ass,
yeah,
but like it was deep enough for me to be interested and to try to learn it and get better. And I don't
yeah,
know. Oh man. Um,
yeah, yeah. But
but that,
well, I mean, go ahead.
I did want to briefly touch on fighting game stuff, and that like I say I haven't been playing a ton, and that means I haven't been competing a ton. I am learning a new character right now, and that's been fun.
Yeah,
I'm learning Ed just like everybody else is, and he's like better Chun. He's so much better than
yeah,
Chun.
yeah. Honestly, I thought me and my son were gonna be playing more because he was interested in Terry, and then when Terry released, like
Yeah,
we got tried out some stuff, and then like one, I knew off the bat like he's not for me. Like I mean, I kind of just knew that just watching and just like he's never been my character. Like I understand kind of like the basics of what he is, but it's just like that's not a character for me. Like I knew that before he even released. And then my son tried him out, and like he played a little bit, but then like I think in some ways, I think I mentioned this to you too. Like I think Street Fighter Six is kind of run its course with him, and
Oh,
I
that's to
don't feel
hear.
like I'm personally at that point. Um,
Really?
but it's just one, I just haven't had really time to play it. Like I literally like the first time I played was yesterday or the day before for like that was the first time in like 2.5 weeks.
Oh
And
yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
I still find, just playing Street Fighter in general fun. Like that's always gonna be fun to me is to just, pick up the stick and go online and just, see where I'm at and play somebody. Like that's always gonna be fun to me. Like I'll find a way to get some of that in. But I don't know, it's just between
Competitive
like
drive's not there then.
huh? Oh yeah, the
The,
competitive side, yeah. Not in terms of like, yeah, I gotta go to these, I wanna go to a tournament and stuff like that. Like just schedule wise, it doesn't work for me. And like that's always been my drive in terms of like competitiveness. But like yeah, I'm
mhm.
always down to kind of play casually and when I have time, that kind of thing. But like yeah, in terms of like even attending tournaments, like that's something that I've really I don't know, it's been years since I've been to Evo and like, I was really wanting to go this year and again it wasn't in the cards. And the more I think about even next year, I'm just like, there's just other things I want to do. So it's just like, you know, with limited work, time off from work, um, you know, flight lessons or not even flight lessons, just flying in general is not cheap. So like, after whenever it is that I, get done and get my license, like I'm gonna want to go fly with whoever, or even just by myself, or take my friends and family out, and like that's gonna be something that I'm gonna want to put time and money into, and it's just like that's something else has got to be sacrificed, and if it's gonna be anything, it's probably gonna be fighting games and any kind of anything related to that.
Yeah, I get it. If especially if your son's not super interested in it anymore,
Yeah,
which I completely understand that one. Like I think around this time for Street Fighter Five, uh, that was around when everybody just stopped playing. Um,
yeah,
this season two, so this lines up. Regardless of the quality of the game, it's still just like everybody puts as much time as they can in for a little bit, but
yeah,
eventually we all go back to real life, and that's something that I not really fighting game related, but like it is again tangentially. So like before we met up today, I was watching a Maximilian video. Like I was literally like prepping the video for this stream,
mm,
or this recording rather, and then just in the YouTube feed, Maximilian's video showed up, and he's got like a clickbait title saying something needs to change, all this other stuff, and he talked about burnout, right?
yeah,
And I noticed just in general, like a lot of YouTubers, they all seem like a lot of them seem to have burnt out. And then
yeah,
like there's a lot of them quitting and a lot of them moving on. A lot of it they blame the algorithm, all this other stuff. Um,
yeah,
and that got me thinking about other stuff. Like there's a lot of people in my life that have just made enormous decisions lately, or big life changes. Another YouTuber group that I really liked, I like to follow, like they're called Team Four Star. They made Dragon Ball Z Abridged. They had like an office in Texas, but they're just closing that down and everyone's moving away.
oh
And it's
damn,
stuff like that where I'm like, yeah, like these are like big life changing decisions I'm seeing these people make. And then like in my friend circles, like a bunch of people that I know have bought houses. Like congratulations
mm,
to everybody I know that's bought a house, or that's looking to buy a house. I have another friend that's starting on a brand new career path, and he
yeah,
like a lot of people are changing jobs, doing a bunch of stuff. I watched I did an interview with somebody at work today that like um I was trying to get them to explain the gap in employment too, and the same deal. It's like everyone had like a big life changing event or like life realignment on what they want to do and what they want out of
hmm
it. And um, I, I don't know. I'm not sure where I'm going with that, but more just like that's just something I've noticed that like we all as a society, or like our friends groups or whatever, like we are all like I feel like we got shocked into it during the pandemic, and I feel weird harping about the pandemic because now it's really been like 4 years.
yeah,
Um, but the way I look at that is like we it shocked us, then it gave us like a really good picture on like what we want, what our lives were currently like,
yeah,
and then it gave us a lot of ideas on what to do with that. what to do to change that. And so like you started the flight lessons, Jess and I got
Yeah.
married, we're buying a house, like, and people are quitting their jobs, changing career paths, all this other stuff. So it's
Yeah.
just, I don't know. I feel like we're in this like weirdly like momentous occasion for everybody involved, because like for all of our friend groups, all society, because everyone's just trying to make drastic changes. We were just we're in a group chat as well, and people are talking about moving across the country, right? So it's stuff
Yeah.
like that where it's like, I think everyone's just stir crazy. everybody
Yeah. Well,
everybody wants to change, and we're all just flailing trying to find what to change.
yeah. Yeah, just I wanted to touch briefly on like in terms of like the fighting game stuff, and my son was like, even though Street Fighter 6 is almost seemed to kind of run its course with him, like I guess in some ways I'm really happy that he's kind of just grown kind of a love for them too. Like because
Mm.
I was recently in Chicago a few weeks ago. The main reason was it was just going to be kind of like a father son trip. We were going to go to the football game, and then we
Nice.
had some other things lined up. It was right around his birthday, and then um, in Chicago, there's Galloping Ghosts, which is the biggest arcade in the world, and
Oh,
we
cool.
we went there. We went there the night before we were gonna leave. So we only had 2 full days. So we went there the night before we were gonna leave, and they've got all. I don't know if I didn't even remember what the number was, but there's arcade cabinets, all over the place, up and down, just aisles and aisles of stuff. And then I found the one area that was like the Neo Geo stuff, like the big reds. And then like I was just telling him, I was like, hey, let's come over here, let's find a fighting game to play. And like, we found some random it was Breaker's Revenge. And like I've heard about that game, like I've seen it on release, I've seen it released on Switch or whatever, and I was just like, let's just try this out. And like we just had fun, like the whole discovery phase of like figuring out which character's what. Like, they kind of had the stereotypical like looking, this guy's probably a grappler. And he looked like a generic T Hawk. And my son likes playing grapplers, and like he was finding some like kind of broke stuff, and I was like, what, this guy's cheap. And like, we're just kind of running through like figuring out moves, supers and stuff like that. So like I think
Yeah.
these I think I'm most happy just the fact that like, he does enjoy the fighting games. So like even if it's not Street Fighter 6, we could always just end up finding something else and like, hey, let's try this out and play this. So yeah, that was definitely a fun little thing to do.
It's like it's like if we were to take if we were talking about deck builders instead, right? It's like he
Yeah.
likes Slay the Spire, but he likes all deck builders. Rather than just
Yeah.
focusing on one specific one, he likes
Yeah.
everything and more of it at a surface level. Breadth
Yeah.
versus depth, I think is the phrase.
Yeah, that
Um,
that and that's something that I've had to kind of come to the realization with in terms of games too, because like when I was growing up, like I'd get a game a quarter, one every like 3 months, and I'd have to like beg and plead for my dad to like my parents to be like, hey, can I get a game? And then like
yeah,
I'd had to make sure like one, I would have to make sure and hope, and like I'd look at reviews and magazines and stuff like, and I would have to hope that this was it, right? Like this was a good game because I'm not getting another one for like 3 months, right? And like for the most part, I think I'd have to look back at like the games that I picked, but I think I picked pretty good games, and like so I'd learned the ins and outs of everything, and like I know that game, like the back
Mhm.
of my hand, like no other. And then nowadays, like you just have the accessibility is crazy. Like we have still have Xbox Game Pass, PC Game Pass, right? So like I'll see him. I'll check out him, see what he's doing, and like he's playing another game, and I'm just like, "What are you playing now?" And he's like, "Oh, I played this. It's on Game Pass." So I can't be mad because like he's not. We're not paying
spending
anything
money.
extra
Yeah,
for it, right? Exactly,
yeah.
right? But he's got access to all these new games. Phone stuff is free or relatively cheap, so it's just like
They didn't have
he's
free to
playing
play games back then, even like Fortnite and
exactly, yeah.
shit, right? Yeah.
Yeah, you might get
No.
what was it called? Shareware? Like you could get the shareware disc, and like
Sure. Yeah, dude.
you can play a level of Wolfenstein and be like, all right, if you want more.
Yeah, I remember like yeah, like a little pop up would happen and have like a little timer before you could actually click OK because
Yeah.
you had to like.
Yeah, that was the extent for us. Like here, you can get full on games. Like yeah, you might get ads with some of them, but I was like, you still get full on games, and it's just like that. Like I said, the accessibility is there. So that's just something I've had to kind of come to terms with in terms of like, just seeing him and like, oh, he's playing something else now, and it's like, oh, did you even finish this? No, but I don't want to play it right now. I'm gonna play this. So the fact that he's lost some interest in Street Fighter 6, like to me, that's not surprising at all. Like you said, because that's kind of how it was with Street Fighter 5, and you know I don't really blame him anyway. Like he's got access to all kinds of stuff. So like, play what
Yeah.
you want, as long as you're having fun and that's all that really matters.
And for the record, I'm not saying Street Fighter 6 is dead by any means. I just
No.
think that like we're at the point now where like every time a new content piece of content for Street Fighter 6 comes out, a bunch of people come back and play it for a little bit, and that's
Yeah.
good enough. Some people might stick around even longer than just trying the DLC character for a day and then dipping. Um,
Yeah.
so it was still a much better state than Street Fighter 5 was in, but
Yeah. Yeah,
there's some.
you mentioned that earlier too, like in terms of like cramming for Evo, and like I don't know why I never kind of like put that together, but
Mm,
like when it comes to like boxing and like UFC and like the real life fight game in terms of that stuff, that's literally what they do. Because like those guys, some guys, they're in the gym and they're working or they're working out just to kind of stay in like general shape. But when it comes to like an actual fight, right? Like they'll have it scheduled and they're like, "Hey, I'm fighting in January," and then they have like their fight camp and they go whatever it's like 8 weeks out, and that's the time to refine everything, and that's the time to cut weight, and it's all timed and perfectly to like be at your peak before the weigh-in and fight night. And like I don't know why I just never thought about it in that sense in terms of like Evo, because like yeah, we'd have our little events like tournaments and stuff to play throughout the year, and then
yeah,
it's like boot camp time. All right, we're 2 months away from Evo. Who's really who's going, like we need to hardcore train and stuff like that. And like you try to get to that peak moment where you're like, all right, I'm feeling good about myself. Going into the weekend.
yeah. Like it's not a montage of steps that we have to run up or anything. I've
Yeah.
seen enough Creed and Rocky movies to know what those boxing boot camps look like.
I mean, it
Oh
would be
man.
good though, because like, in terms of like the walking and stuff, because that's actually something that I actually started doing during this break too. It was like towards the kind of like mid end of September. Is part of it's like flight related because um when it comes to like building time and building hours flying, like a lot of people they split time with other people, and a lot of times it's in planes that are smaller, and depending on the weight of one person, it's going to determine how much what the other person can be for the weight and balance stuff. So like I remember I was looking at one guy's Facebook post, and he's like, "Hey, does anybody want to go flying with me? Blah blah blah. We're going here for this long, and like this is how much it costs. I'm in this kind of plane though, so you're gonna need to be 180 pounds or less." And I'm like, "Holy shit!" I'm like way beyond that. So it became a motivating factor for me towards September, where I was just like, you know what, I need to lose a bunch of weight, because like if I'm gonna end up flying with anybody, like it's not gonna happen, at my current weight. So
What
that's
a
basically
I
what I've been doing for.
I did not think you would have to lose weight to be a pilot, but it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I mean,
So
as
that's
you
why
get
you've
into
been
like the
walking
bigger
so
planes.
much.
Yeah, so I've been basically committed kind of towards the end of September to about basically 30 minutes or 2 miles, and like lately it's been like I've been kind of pushing myself, because there was like days when like I didn't feel well, and I was just like, all right, I'm gonna, if I'm feeling up for it this morning, I'm gonna just kind of walk as far as I can. And like I walked 5 miles like 2 days ago, and I've never done
Wow,
that.
that's a
Yeah,
lot, man.
yeah, I was
I
surprised. That was kind of a circumstance too, because like I had dropped my daughter off, or my daughter was gonna go to an appointment. So I was like, "Here, drop me off by this canal trail or whatever, and I'm just gonna walk for like an hour, and then you come pick me up when you're done with the appointment." And then like it turns out like because it was for like a flat tire, and then turns out she needed to get new tires, so like she had to go do all that stuff, and she's like, "Yeah, they're not gonna be ready till like 40 more minutes." And I'm like sitting around, I'm just like, I'm in the middle of downtown Gilbert. I was like, what am I going to do here for the next 40 minutes? So I was like, you know what? I'm just going to keep walking. Like the first place that I lived was here, was actually not too far. I was like 20 minutes away. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to walk there, pick me up there in 20 minutes, right? I get into that neighborhood and I'm like looking around. I was like, oh man, like, it's just kind of reminiscing on stuff. And I call her and I was like, hey, you ready? She's like, no. And I was just like, well, I can't just hang around this neighborhood. Like, I'm just like a random person in this neighborhood. I can't just like sit around here. So I was just like, I guess I'm gonna walk back to downtown Gilbert. And I spent the next 20 minutes going back. So yeah, that's basically why I've been walking so much in the last month, and just trying to like really be consistent with that.
That's good, man. That's also like the most dad thing that I've heard you do. Outside of like us flying in airplanes. That's a pretty dad thing to do, I think, too. Oh
Yeah.
man. Yeah, I mean,
Uh,
it's also we were talking about the weather earlier too. Like, it's a great time to start doing that. That's another reason why, like even filming this podcast or recording this podcast, like it gets hot in this room because like the sun beats on the wall during the day, and so it's really difficult to
yeah.
close the door and record in here for a very long period of time. But it has cooled down a little bit, so it's not nearly as bad as it was. So another good reason for our break is that I'm not sweating my balls off trying to edit this video. Oh man.
Yeah, before
But
we kind of like wrap things up here, did you want to talk a little bit more about other things that you had going on? Or
yeah, I mean, realistically, that's kind of it. So I said work, house, and other like isolation due to fucking overuse of social media and internet. And yeah, with the election and everything coming up, that basically covered everything that I had. If
yeah. So what
anything,
do
like
you
that. Oh, go ahead.
Oh no, I was gonna say in terms of like what how do you see things kind of playing out here in the next, I guess, couple months
Ah,
here
our
with regarding
future.
this. Yeah, regarding
Yeah,
this.
yeah, where we've been and where we're going. So yeah, that's like the core of this is like we're gonna be moving early November, so I'm gonna be packing for that. Packing and then unpacking and then doing projects around the house till the end of November at least. And I imagine the holidays are gonna keep us pretty busy too. So I think I think we talked little bit about this before we started taping, but like I think the plan is we are gonna shoot for hitting the ground running at the beginning of the year for sure. We're not looking to stop doing this. We're looking to keep going. It's just we had
Yeah.
things pop up, and once those things settle down, as you said, like your flight lessons seem to be slowing down.
Yeah.
This house, once we're done with that like I will have checked a giant box off my list here.
Yeah.
So at that point, that's when I start grinding the hobbies again, and that's what this is. So
Yeah.
I'm hoping that we can improve the audio quality. If anything, given the amount of time it took for us to even shoot this episode today because of all the audio issues, it's a lot of fixed, by the way. Like I apologize in advance if anybody had difficulty hearing either of us. But I uh, I have a couple of ideas there, um,
Mm.
and hopefully that's just in general. Like we spent this past year kind of like refining the formula and talk, like, talking with our friends and shooting the shit a lot and kind of like
Yeah.
pulling it back from this grand idea of it chronicling the history of the fighting game community. Um,
Yeah.
but I would like to get back to a point where we're improving and iterating on this again, because by and large
Yeah.
the show format hasn't changed over the past year. So
Yeah.
that's where I want to go next year.
Cool. Yeah, like I mean, yeah, like I said, the evening stuff, like I mean, just kind of time everything kind of just worked out in terms of like us both being busy because like once I get this last night flight to Marana out of the way, like I don't really need to fly at night
Mm,
going forward. A lot of it's going to be daytime stuff.
nice.
So that'll be nice, especially because with it being cooler too. So like, yeah, I'd be able to go do flights in the morning or midday, that stuff. Because like, yeah, in the summertime when it's hot, it's miserable. Like
Right.
when I'm flying by myself or with somebody else next year, like, yeah, I'm not anything past like probably 10 a.m. in the summertime is probably not gonna happen. I'm gonna be up and be like, hey, you guys want to go fly at like 7 a.m. Like, yeah, it's miserable, man. Like, yeah, until I get to that point to where I get to those nicer planes with like the AC and stuff like that. Like, yeah, if I'm doing anything else, like, yeah, it's gonna be in the mornings when it's cool.
I feel you, man. Um, but yeah, no intentions of stopping. We're gonna keep juggling everything we are, and yeah, I don't know. So I guess yeah, the next time you see us, will at the very latest it'll be next year. But I think we are gonna try to squeeze in a couple. Maybe we'll do one in
Yeah.
November and one in December. I
Yeah,
just
which that sounds a
yeah
little bit more feasible. Yeah, I don't know. Again, we were kind of playing it by ear, like up to now, basically kind of week to week, and then it's probably going to kind of be a little bit of more of the same. Like, hey, where you at with this? Because, like you said, you're going to be moving. Like, I'm sure your PC is probably gonna be one of the first things set up.
yeah yeah it will
Yeah, but
be
besides that, I mean, you're gonna have other things. You might just be tired or whatever. So it's just like all
yeah.
understandable kind of things, especially when you're moving. So.
I got to unpack every other room too. That's the other side of it. But, oh
Yeah.
man. But cool. I guess that wraps it up. Usually we have shout outs and stuff like that, but it's been a
Uh,
while.
it was a good time just to kind of catch up and see what you were doing too. Because like you said, like, we hadn't had a lot of time to kind of just chat amongst each other as friends too. So
Totally, totally. Yeah, and again, I want to start just going out and hanging out with friends again, going to get dinners and stuff like that. So,
yeah.
yeah. All right. Any other closing shout outs or closing thoughts before we kill the show?
Nah,
Kill the
man, I
show is
think
the
we're
wrong way to
good.
put it. Cool. Well, this has been the Absolute Guard Podcast, episode 90 with Jon, Benny, and nobody else. You can find us on Twitch at twitch.tv/spiral series, YouTube at youtube.com/spiral series, and on Apple Podcasts and Spotify under Absolute Guard. To all of you watching and listening, we appreciate all of you that have liked and subscribed and welcome any feedback you may have. I deliberately tried to read all that because we haven't asked for a like and subscribe in a very long time. Not that that matters. But that's it. Have a good night, everybody. We'll talk to you when we talk to you.
All right, man.